I win, Bruce said something about you having to take us all to brunch?
Oh, see, now that's cold. That's a betrayal.
This was the moment it all went off the rails. Could the powers that be have fixed the DCEU up until this point? Frankly, despite numerous missteps, yes, they could have. But releasing a bizarre concoction of refilmed footage and poorly thought out recharacterizations sank the entirety of the DCEU. There was just no coming back from the travesty that was Justice League. So that begs the question, what exactly went wrong with the DCEU?
Like brunch. Like, what is brunch? You wait in line for an hour for essentially lunch.
Following the massive success of Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, the pressure was on for DC to create a shared universe of films to compete with Marvel's rapidly blossoming MCU. Warner's went to Nolan and asked if he'd godfather a new Superman movie. And therein lies the original sin that poisoned the well of the DCEU. Nolan is an amazing director, no doubt, but his sensibilities obviously don't align well with the Man of Tomorrow. Add to this gumbo of misunderstandings the Randian directorial stylings of Zack Snyder, and you're just fundamentally starting off on the wrong foot.
I'm here to help, but it has to be on my own terms.
Man of Steel, the film chosen to launch this new shared universe, climaxes with Superman snapping Zod's neck. Gone was the Boy Scout who saves cats from trees. Here was a new Metropolis Marvel, one forged of anger and death. This grim take on the character was a bold new direction, and one that risked alienating the ardent fans of the character. The box office didn't care though. The film was a resounding hit for the studio, and they doubled down on Snyder. They knew they needed a spiritual godfather charting the direction of their new universe, and he was there, willing and able.
We just felt like it was an original and interesting concept to pit him against another hero, but a darker hero. And Batman was the perfect foil.
The next film released was Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice, another dark and brooding take on the characters, which attempted to launch them into a cataclysmic battle. The problem here was that we hadn't had enough time with these big screen icons to feel like this crossover was truly earned.
Bruce Wayne meets Clark Kent. I love bringing people together. Lex, it is a pleasure. Ow! Wow, that is a good grip. You should not pick a fight with this person.
To compare it to Marvel for a second, it's like releasing Iron Man and then releasing Avengers Age of Ultron next. Add to this poorly thought out mix the introduction of Lex Luthor, Wonder Woman, and a very strange digital dossier that featured a bunch of logos and security camera footage of the Justice League members. The film leaves you with the ultimately unsatisfying feeling of, well, at least they're trying to catch up with Marvel, I guess?
This thing is from another world. My world.
I've killed things from other worlds before.
She with you?
I thought she was with you.
At this point, the digital room temperature was beginning to heat up on Snyder. There seemed to be a distinct push and pull between what the fans were vocal about and what DC and Warner's were willing to allow Snyder to get away with. Did the Batman footage in Batman vs. Superman rule? Absolutely. Was it also really dumb that Batman indiscriminately used guns and murdered people? Also yes. And while Snyder was fighting political battles on the direction of his subsequent films, David Ayer had been adapting Suicide Squad to the big screen, which by all accounts was initially heralded as a creative triumph. Then, as the fans became more vocal about how much they weren't responding to Snyder's dark and brooding tone, Warner's execs decided to pivot the film.
Seriously, the hell's wrong with you people?
We're bad guys. It's what we do.
A new marketing campaign was quickly put together, with recut footage that made the project seem like something much closer to Guardians of the Galaxy. Reshoots were ordered, and the end product feels like what it is: a film that was made by an auteur that was then cut to shreds and made into a jukebox musical. Captain Boomerang and Harley Quinn each have like 3 introduction scenes in the film. It's almost laughable. This is now 3 examples in a row of how DC was ostensibly a captainless ship. There was no creative or universe-wide architect that was there guiding things in a non-boots-on-the-ground creative way.
Harley Quinn, nice to meet ya. Love your perfume. What is that, the stench of death?
The next summer, 2017, saw the release of Wonder Woman, which proved to be a much-needed box office and critical win for the studio. This film is still looked back on fondly, or at least the first half of it is. And here's where things fully go off the rails. At this time, while Suicide Squad and Wonder Woman are in production, Snyder has been working away creating his version of the Justice League. Should DC probably have waited to have their team-up movie? You know, give the world more narrative runway? In hindsight, Yes, absolutely. They didn't want to put the legwork in to build their crossovers the way Marvel had. They seemed to be battling both internal and external expectations of what these films should be, and it all caught up to them with this project.
So you're fast.
That feels like an oversimplification.
I'm putting together a team.
Stop right there. I'm in.
You are?
Justice League stormed its way into theaters, but not before Snyder was pushed out and massive sections of the movie were reshot by Joss Whedon. Would tripling down and just releasing a darker Justice League have worked? Who knows? Putting out this abomination, where 40% of Henry Cavill's scenes were reshot with a CGI demustaching filter on, that's obviously not what anyone wanted.
Well, I knew you didn't bring me back because you like me.
I don't.
The film, in turn, underperformed drastically at the box office, and that's to say nothing of the drubbing it received critically. The fact that Warner's botched the rollout of arguably the biggest superhero team of all time this hard is almost inconceivable. It's the type of potential squandering that should have ended everyone's careers. From here, the DCEU was adrift. What was it building towards? Who was in charge? That would change from week to week. Aquaman would pull in $1 billion. Shazam would be well received. Then, in February of 2020, Birds of Prey would pull in only $33 million on opening weekend, shocking many commentators and Warners alike. What was the lesson there? Did audiences want more lighthearted characters? Did they not want Margot Robbie's inarguably iconic Harley Quinn outside of the Suicide Squad? Well, none of that really seemed to matter because a global pandemic enveloped everyone, causing Wonder Woman 1984 to be released straight to streaming platforms.
And no data suggested that was going to change. I should have folded then. But all the people that bought in, that believed in me. I wanted to do right.
And for a moment, it seemed that the DCEU was in stasis. They didn't have a Kevin Feige or a George Lucas masterminding the entirety of the universe. In an effort to convince people to sign up for HBO Max, they decided to give Snyder $70 million to produce the ultimate director's cut, known in fan circles as the Snyder Cut. Extended sequences, seemingly hours of slow-mo, and newly added cameos all created a product that's objectively better than the Frankenstein's monster that is the theatrical cut of Justice League, but isn't anything even remotely resembling a classic superhero film. The film has its defenders, no doubt, but we can all agree it's a bit self-indulgent, right? That all being said, the Steppenwolf design is so much better. Did it work to get a surge in subscribers to the fledgling streaming service? Oh, absolutely. But what it also did was stoke the ire and discontent of the most hardcore of Snyder supporters, which frankly is understandable. Warner says, we're not going in this direction anymore, and then puts out an objectively better product, which is met with a near standing ovation, and then they still don't follow up on that. What a perfect way to piss off your most ardent supporters. Side note, if you're curious to see what Snyder's original plans for Justice League 2 and 3 would have been, please check out our video on the topic, linked in the description below.
Big round table. 6 chairs, right there.
But room for more.
So now the DCEU is fully directionless. There's no de facto leader. The waters were muddied. Where do you go from here? The answer Warner's decided was, let's not worry about universe building, let's just try and make some successful movies. From here, we got James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, an overtly fun and poppy rendition of the characters from the previous film. It's better than most of the late-stage DCEU movies, but still never quite reaches the heights you can feel it striving for.
No one likes to show off.
Unless what they're showing off is dope as fuck.
Then you have Black Adam, which is a train wreck of blandness masquerading as something more than a vanity project for Dwayne Johnson. The less said about this project, the better. We also got Shazam, Fury of the Gods, and The Flash, both financial and critical failures. The Flash, specifically, had multiple controversies, rushed CGI, and a very strange approach to making a universe-correcting crossover. The project was supposed to be a full universe course correct. They were going to reposition a new status quo with Supergirl and Batgirl as the new dynamic duo at the heart of the universe going forward. That obviously didn't happen, and the Batgirl film was never released, despite having completed production. The final 2 entries in the DCEU, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom and Blue Beetle, were both dead on arrival. They were too little too late. No one cared that the first Aquaman made $1 billion. At this point, Warner's had run the DC brand into the ground.
They say everybody's good at something. Me? I talk to fish.
And we all know what happens from here. James Gunn and Peter Safran were called in and hired to revamp the DC Extended Universe. They renamed it to the DC Universe, which is not confusing or annoying at all due to the fact that this is the exact name for the underlying source material. So, back to the original question, what went wrong with the DCEU?
Nawe.
And?
Yes, that is your hand, Nawe. Very good.
First, Warner's never selected a producer to oversee the whole thing that had the creative vision that Marvel's Kevin Feige has. They handed the reins to a director who got carried away with building out his vision of what DC could be. The strength and ultimate weakness of Marvel is that it is a shared storytelling experiment. It's hundreds of people working across many films to craft a shared creative vision. That's why having a producer at the head is actually a really great decision, because he's not going to impose a stylistic remit. He's only going to pull back on a specific creative team's more outlandish idea or impulses. When DC opted to give the figurehead spot to Snyder initially, they didn't think through just how difficult it could be to deal with a creative person without any checks or balances. Another obviously glaring flaw in the process was the fact that DC didn't want to openly mimic the Marvel playbook. They were self-conscious about being seen as cheap imitations. However, the structure that Marvel pioneered is objectively the best way to attempt to accomplish a shared universe. Start out with solo movies, usually origins, then evolve into a crossover movie, and then build up to a climactic conclusion involving a big bad like Thanos in Endgame. Rushing to a Justice League team-up before properly laying the groundwork bit them in the ass in more ways than anyone could have anticipated.
This is crazy.
Oh, what, now it's crazy?
You lunatics better know what you're doing.
And then on top of all these myriad poor choices, the choice to try and reboot the universe with The Flash and then instantly abandon it, as well as never actually picking a creative figurehead to shepherd things forward, could just never be overcome. Up until Gunn and Safran, DC literally never had a figurehead that wasn't involved in the actual production of the films. This brings us to the obvious question at hand. Are Warner's repeating the same mistakes they made with Snyder by installing Gunn as the head of the studio and its chief creative force? Only time will tell. So far, it seems to be working out for them. But what happens when Gunn directs something that doesn't land, or isn't critically acclaimed? Who's going to say no to him? Thankfully, Gunn appears to be attempting to leave space for other creatives to tell stories in their own style, having repeatedly said that there is no house style for the DC films, that he wants the individual writers and directors to bring their voices to the universe, which, again, in theory sounds great, but isn't that how we got in hot water in the first place? Only time will tell. And well, that's all we have for this episode. What do you think? Is the DCU going to make the same mistakes as the DCEU? Let us know in the comments below, and of course, as always, please like and subscribe for more Nerdstalgic videos just like this.